Coffee was still hot when my phone rang. I remember that detail clearly because I had just poured it. That first cup, the one I always make too strong, and I was standing at the kitchen window watching the snow come down over the backyard. February in Sudbury, the kind of morning where the world goes completely quiet under all that white. My wife was upstairs. I could hear the floorboards above me, that familiar creak near the bathroom door. I picked up without looking at the screen. "Is she home?" my brother-in-law said. I almost laughed. He has an odd sense of humor, my wife's younger brother, always has. I've known him since he was 19 years old, back when he used to crash on our couch during university reading weeks. Now he manages the guest services floor at the Fairmont in Vancouver, 23 years in hospitality. The man notices everything about everyone. "Good morning to you too," I said. "Yes, she's upstairs. Why?" He didn't answer right away. "Hello," I said. "I'm looking at her right now," he said. "She just checked in. Suite 422. And she's not alone." I set the coffee down. I didn't drop it. I set it down very carefully, the way you do when your hands suddenly don't trust themselves. I walked to the bottom of the stairs. The floorboards were still creaking. Water running now. She was in the shower. "That's not possible," I told him. "She's here. I can hear the water running. I know what I'm seeing," he said, and his voice had gone very flat and very quiet. "I've known her my whole life. It's her." I stood there at the bottom of the stairs for a long moment. Steam was drifting under the bathroom door at the top. The shower ran on. "Send me a photo," I said. He hesitated. "I can't do that from the floor. I'd lose my job." "Can you describe him?" 60s. Silver hair. Well dressed. They came in with matching luggage. A pause. Booked under a name I don't recognize. But I recognized her the second she walked through the door. She even waved at me. Smiled. Like everything was perfectly normal. I sat down on the second step. "My wife and I have been married for 31 years. We met at a fundraiser for the Hospital Foundation in 1993, introduced by a mutual friend. She was volunteering. I was there because my firm had bought a table. She was the most direct person I had ever met. I proposed 11 months later. Our son was born the year after. 31 years. "What name is the room under?" I asked. He read it out to me. I didn't recognize it. I went back to the kitchen and I wrote it down on the notepad we keep by the phone, the one she uses for grocery lists. Her handwriting was still on the top sheet. Milk. Lemons. The good olive oil. I tore the sheet off and wrote the name underneath. My wife came downstairs 40 minutes later in her housecoat, hair wrapped in a towel. She kissed my cheek the way she always does and poured herself a coffee and asked if I wanted eggs. I said no. She asked if I was all right. I said I hadn't slept well. She sat across from me at the kitchen table and I watched her wrap both hands around her mug, and I thought, I know this woman. I know exactly how she holds a coffee cup. I know the way she tucks her feet up under her when she sits. I know the sound she makes when she's about to say something she thinks I don't want to hear. She was exactly herself, every detail. And I thought, then my brother-in-law is wrong. He made a mistake. People make mistakes, but I kept thinking about what he said. She smiled at him, like everything was perfectly normal. My wife has never once been able to hide anything from her brother. He is one of 3 people on this earth who can read her completely. They grew up sharing a bedroom in a 2-story house in Sault Ste. Marie. He knows the sound of her laugh from down a hallway. He knows which side she parts her hair on. He knows the little scar on her left wrist from a childhood accident involving a wire fence and a dare she never should have taken. He does not make that kind of mistake. I spent 2 days saying nothing. I told myself I needed to be certain before I did anything. I am 64 years old and I have spent 40 years in commercial real estate and I understand the cost of acting on incomplete information. So I watched, I paid attention. I started noticing things I had stopped noticing years ago. She was on her phone more than usual. Not dramatically more. Not in a way that would have registered if I hadn't been looking, but more. She would glance at it during dinner and set it face down on the table. She started going to bed earlier than me, said she was tired, and I would come upstairs an hour later to find her already asleep, or seeming to be. On the third day, I called my accountant. I told him I wanted a quiet review of our joint accounts going back 12 months. He's been my accountant for 19 years, and he is not a man who asks unnecessary questions. He called me back the following Tuesday. The withdrawal started 14 months ago. Cash, always under $10,000, always at different branches. Never at the same location twice. 11 transactions in 14 months. Totals just over $94,000. I sat in my car in the parking lot of my office building for a long time after that call. $94,000. Taken carefully, systematically, in a way specifically designed not to trigger the reporting thresholds at the bank. Whoever was doing this understood how financial monitoring works. That was not a small thing. My wife grew up in a working-class family. Her father drove a delivery truck. Her mother worked at a department store. She has always been careful with money, sometimes to the point where it caused friction between us, back in the early years when I wanted to take risks and she wanted to hold back. I had always seen that as a feature. Security. Groundedness. I was rethinking a great many things. I called my brother-in-law again that night. I asked him to describe in as much detail as he could remember exactly what he had seen. He told me the man was my age, possibly a few years younger, confident in the way of someone accustomed to good hotels. He had put his hand on the small of my wife's back as they walked to the elevator. Not tentative, familiar. I asked if he had seen her since. They stayed 3 nights, he said. Checked out Thursday morning. Ordered room service both evenings. She came down to the lobby alone once, got a coffee, sat by the window for about 20 minutes, looked at her phone. She seemed, he paused, she seemed relaxed, happy. I don't know how to say this to you. Just say it. She seemed more relaxed than I've seen her in years. I thanked him and hung up. The next morning I called a private investigator. I found him through a lawyer I trust, a colleague who handles family law. I told him what I knew and what I suspected, and I told him I needed documentation, not assumptions. He quoted me a flat fee. I agreed without negotiating, which is not like me, and he noticed and he told me he would be thorough. He was. Over the following 3 weeks, he confirmed that my wife had taken 4 trips in the past 8 months that I had not known about. She had told me she was visiting her college friend in Ottawa, attending a professional development weekend in Toronto, helping her cousin move in Calgary. Standard explanations. The kind I never had reason to question because I trusted her. The man was a recently retired surgeon from Edmonton. Divorced. No children. They had apparently met at a conference in Banff 2 years ago. The investigator found hotel records, restaurant receipts, a reservation at a wine bar in the Distillery District in Toronto that she had charged to a credit card I didn't know she had opened. A credit card I didn't know she had opened. I sat with all of this for a week. I want to be honest about that week because it is the part I find hardest to talk about. I have always thought of myself as a rational man, methodical, not prone to theatrics. But that week I was none of those things. I went to the office every day and I sat at my desk and I looked at files and I understood nothing. I went to the grocery store and stood in the produce aisle for 8 minutes unable to decide between 2 types of apple. I called my son one evening and talked for 20 minutes about nothing and had to end the call quickly because my voice was starting to go and I didn't want him to hear it. My son is 30 years old. He lives in Halifax with his partner. They are expecting their first child in the spring. I want very much to be a grandfather who holds things together. I did not tell him anything. What I did instead was make an appointment with a family lawyer. I went alone on a Thursday afternoon and I laid out everything I knew. The lawyer, a woman about my son's age, calm and precise, explained my options clearly. She talked about equalization of net family property, about the implications of the undisclosed credit card, about the cash withdrawals and what they might indicate in terms of deliberate dissipation of assets. She said the documentation I had was unusually thorough for someone coming in at this stage. She said that was good. I asked her how long these things typically take. She said it depends on cooperation. I drove home. My wife was in the kitchen when I got there. She had made lamb chops, my favorite, the ones she does with rosemary and garlic and a little Dijon, and she had opened a bottle of the Niagara Red we bought on a trip to wine country 6 years ago. There were 2 glasses on the table. She smiled when I walked in and asked how my day was. I stood in the doorway and I looked at her. 31 years. I know exactly how she holds a coffee cup. I said my day was fine. I sat down. I ate the lamb chops. They were excellent, as they always are. We talked about the weather and about our son's upcoming visit and about whether we should replace the furnace this year or wait one more winter. She laughed at something I said. That particular laugh. The one I've heard 10,000 times. I watched her refill my glass without being asked because she always knows when it's running low. I thought, who is this person? Not with anger. With something quieter than anger and harder to name. 2 days later, on a Saturday morning, I asked her to sit down. She knew immediately. I saw it happen. A small shift in her posture. Nothing dramatic. The kind of thing you only catch after 3 decades with someone. She sat down across from me at the kitchen table, the same chairs, and she put her hands flat on the surface in front of her and she waited. I told her what I knew. I didn't raise my voice. I had decided beforehand that I would not raise my voice. I told her about the call from her brother, about the investigator, about the accounts, about the credit card. I put the documentation on the table between us, and I left it there. She didn't deny anything. That surprised me more than I expected. I had imagined, rehearsed in some part of my mind the confrontation, indignation, explanation, the strange performance of innocence collapsing under evidence. Instead, she looked at her hands on the table for a long moment, and then she looked at me and she said, I didn't know how to leave. I said, so this was leaving. She said, I didn't have a plan. I know that sounds, the $94,000 sounds like a plan, I said. She closed her eyes. She told me she had been unhappy for a long time. She said it carefully, the way she says things she has been composing in her head for a while. She said she didn't think I would notice. Not the money, she meant, but the unhappiness itself. She said she had been invisible inside our marriage for years, that I had stopped seeing her as a person and started seeing her as a fixture, the way you stop seeing the furniture you've lived with too long. I listened to all of it. I don't know if she was right. I have thought about it a great deal since, and I genuinely don't know. I know that I worked long hours and that I was distracted, and that I probably took for granted things I shouldn't have. I also know that $94,000 is a specific kind of answer to a problem you could have solved by talking to your husband. We did not raise our voices. That was the thing I kept returning to afterward. How quiet it all was. This enormous thing, and we sat at the kitchen table in the February light and spoke to each other in ordinary voices like 2 people settling a practical matter, which is perhaps what it had become. I moved into the guest bedroom that night. She stayed in our room. We ate dinner separately for 3 weeks, passing each other in the hallway with the careful courtesy of people who understand that this is temporary. I called my son when I was ready. He took it harder than I expected. Not the separation itself, I think, but something about the idea of the house he grew up in, what it meant to him. He flew home for a weekend in March. We sat at the kitchen table, the 3 of us, and it was the strangest meal I have ever sat through. Completely civil. No recriminations, just the three of us and the particular grief of something ending. He pulled me aside before he left and asked if I was going to be all right. I told him yes. I don't know if that was entirely true at the time, but it is true now. The divorce was finalized in September. The process was civil, as these things go. No court appearances, no extended disputes. The financial piece took time because of the undisclosed accounts, and my lawyer was thorough, and in the end, things were settled in a way the law would call equitable. I don't know if I would use that word, but it was done. I kept the house. I wasn't sure I wanted it at first. Too many rooms, too much of a particular life embedded in every surface. But I found as the months went on that I didn't want to leave Sudbury. I've been here my whole adult life. My son's first steps were in this hallway. My father's old armchair is still in the den. The view of the backyard in winter is the same view I have looked at for 30 years. In October, I finally replaced the furnace. I have coffee in the morning now in a way I did not used to. Slowly. The kitchen is quiet and I let it be quiet. I look out at the backyard. The snow is starting again this year, same as every year. My brother-in-law called me last month. We have stayed close, which surprised some people and didn't surprise me at all. He is a good man, and whatever happened between his sister and me is between his sister and me. He called to ask how I was doing, and we talked for a long time about his job, about the new baby in Halifax, about hockey, about getting older. At the end of the call, he said, "I'm sorry I was the one who had to tell you." I told him he had nothing to apologize for. And I meant it. Whatever it cost me to know, not knowing would have cost me more. I am 64 years old. I have lived long enough to understand that there is no version of this story where everyone comes out undamaged. Things break, and the break is real, and the market leaves is real. But I am still here. I still make my coffee too strong. The backyard is still make my coffee too strong. The backyard is still full of snow. My grandson was born in April, 8 pounds 2 ounces. My son called me from the hospital at 2 in the morning, and I sat in the kitchen in my dressing gown and cried, which I am not ashamed of. Some mornings I stand at the window and think about 31 years and what they were and what they weren't. I think about the lamb chops and the wine and how well she knew when my glass was running low. I think about the things I may have failed to see. And then I finish my coffee and I go about the day. That is, I have come to understand what you do. There's a particular kind of quiet that comes after everything falls apart. Not peaceful, just empty. Like a room where the furniture used to be. I think about the morning Miles called me. I was standing at my own kitchen window, coffee in hand, watching snow come down over a backyard I'd looked at for 30 years. Everything felt ordinary. And then it didn't. That's the thing nobody tells you. The ordinary doesn't warn you when it's ending. I've had a lot of time since then to think about cause and effect. Not in any mystical sense, just the plain logic of it. Actions accumulate. Choices stack up. What happened in my marriage didn't begin the morning Miles called. It began years before that in smaller moments I didn't pay close enough attention to. Evenings I was distracted. Conversations I half heard. A woman who slowly stopped feeling seen inside her own home. I'm not excusing what she did. $94,000, a hidden credit card, years of carefully maintained lies. Those were her choices and she owns them. But I've been honest enough with myself in the months since to admit that a marriage is never entirely one person's failure. That honesty took something out of me. It also gave something back. What I learned the hard way at 64 is that integrity isn't only about what you do when people are watching. It's about what you're willing to see when you'd rather look away. I looked away for too long. I told myself the life we had was solid because the surface was smooth. I confused the absence of conflict with the presence of connection. Those are not the same thing, and I should have known better. The clear-headedness I needed, the kind that let me sit across a table from my own lawyer, from my own accountant, from my own son, and hold myself steady, that didn't come from anger. It came from finally deciding to think clearly when every instinct was telling me not to gather facts before I spoke, to understand what I was actually dealing with before I reacted to it. That discipline is the only reason the ending of my marriage didn't also become the ending of my finances, my relationship with my son, or whatever years I have left. And then there's the getting up afterward. That part I underestimated. I thought the hard part was finding out the truth. It wasn't. The hard part was the Tuesday morning 3 weeks later when I made coffee for one, and the house was very quiet, and I had to decide, in a completely undramatic way, whether I was going to be all right or not. No audience, no resolution music, just me in the kitchen and the backyard and the question of what comes next. I decided I was going to be all right. Not because I was certain, but because I chose to act as though I was, and kept choosing it, morning after morning, until it became true. Callum was born in April. 8 pounds, 2 ounces. My son called at 2 in the morning, and I sat in the kitchen in my dressing gown and I cried, and I was not ashamed of it at all. You can lose a great deal and still find yourself at the end of it sitting in your own kitchen watching your own backyard with something left worth keeping. That, I think, is enough.